Good afternoon, fellow university colleagues. My name is Matilda Gibson, and today I'm going to be presenting my findings on how students learn. As a teacher, it is fundamental to understand my students' diverse learning styles and know how to set up learning in a way that reduces distractions and maximises memory retention. In this presentation, I aim to present up-to-date information on multitasking, learning styles, and effective classroom strategies. On the screen are key questions I will answer throughout this presentation. Firstly, I'm going to investigate two journal articles from 2019 and 2020 that provide insights into how multitasking impacts learning and memory. Secondly, I will discuss David Kolb's experiential learning theory and his learning cycle to better understand how teachers should support diverse learning styles. Finally, I will discuss project-based learning, its approach, and how it supports my findings on multitasking and learning styles. Let's begin by discussing multitasking and its impacts on learning and memory. Multitasking happens all around us, and we do it all throughout our day. According to Madore and Wagner, multitasking means trying to perform two or more tasks concurrently, which typically leads to repeatedly switching between tasks or leaving one task unfinished to do another. This definition points out the true nature of multitasking. It is difficult for our brains to focus on multiple tasks at one time. Madore and Wagner provide interesting insights into the cognitive process that takes place when our brains process tasks and subsequently try and multitask. They state that the human mind and brain lack the architecture to perform two or more tasks simultaneously. This is interesting because a lot of us believe that we can multitask. Their research presents three main brain systems involved in task processing. Within the frontoparietal control network, the brain identifies tasks and their goals, selects relevant information, and disregards irrelevant information. In the dorsal attention network, the information aligned with the task is mediated for relevant information. Finally, the ventral attention network responds to distracting information during the task. When you try and multitask, each brain system is pushed harder and requires more neural processing to focus on both tasks, and your brain may choose one task over another. This is what Madore and Wagner call task switching. In a classroom setting, this may look like texting, talking to a friend, browsing social media, and any other off-task behaviours. When we switch between tasks, we miss out on that deep focus we could experience if we presented our brains with only one task. Madore and Wagner conducted working memory and long-term memory tests to compare results between heavy and light media multitaskers. Their comparison showed that heavy media multitaskers performed worse in both tests, revealing gaps in working memory and long-term memory outcomes. This is a concern as memory retention is very important for learning. The article's takeaway points are that people should carefully consider when they need to deeply focus on a task and ensure they remove media and non-media tasks that could create a situation of split focus in their brains. The main limitation of this article are that studies were conducted on university students, although they indicated that these insights can be applied to all age groups. The next article that I will analyse is Jamet and his colleagues' work on multitasking and learning outcomes. Their research is a year later, so let's compare the findings. Concerning multitasking and cognitive function, Jamet et al. Discuss Richard E. Mayer's 2014 cognitive theory of multimedia learning. Within this, they refer to three main sources of cognitive load: essential processing, which is necessary for selecting and analysing; generative processing, which is the motivation and effort to achieve learning; and finally, extraneous processing, which is used for processing information that is irrelevant to the learning. According to the authors, to promote meaningful learning, the educational environment must minimize extraneous processing to avoid cognitive overload. Once this is achieved, essential processing is facilitated, leading to higher generative processing. If this is not achieved, students will multitask, and this could lead to lower educational outcomes or performance. Gimmet et al. Refer to situations in which extraneous processing is not hindered as dual task situations. In these circumstances, students may multitask by interacting in off-task activities on their computers or phones, or even chatting with their peers. Gimmet et al.'s results showed that dual task situations have a deleterious effect on memory retention. One of their tests involved half of a lecture classroom with their laptops open and the other half with their laptops closed. Results showed that the students with their laptops open retained less of the lecture content than their peers. Reports showed that open laptop students were more tempted to multitask than their peers. The main takeaways from this article are that minimizing extraneous processing, in other words multitasking, in the classroom is important to ensure that learning and memory retention are achieved. Some of the main limitations of this article are similar to Medora and Wagner's. The studies were extracted from university level students, although still provide insights that can be applied to all age groups. Additionally, the article focused mostly on multimedia multitasking, which is not the only type, although quite prevalent in Australian society. In this next segment, I'm going to discuss David Kolb's experiential learning theory, his cycle, and the learning styles associated with the theory. According to Dantas and Kuna, learning styles is the complex manner in which learners most effectively perceive, process, store, and recall what they are attempting to learn. Following this definition, the authors report that people learn through different learning styles. This is backed up by Ganira and Odundo in their article on learning styles. They suggest that teachers should devise activities that give opportunities to all learners to learn in ways which go well with them. Their findings indicate that David Kolb's experiential learning theory can support teachers to achieve this. David Kolb presents an experiential learning theory, also known as the ELT, which is built on the research and findings from Vygotsky's concept of zones of proximal development. According to Dantas and Kuna, this theory assumes that learning is built from the experience lived in context, in interaction with the knowledge that each individual has already accumulated at a given moment. However, they recommend that teachers should construct these environments in which the learning can take place, because learning does not occur in every experience. One way in which teachers can apply Kolb's ELT is through his experiential learning cycle, also known as the ELC. If you refer to this diagram of the ELC, you can see that Kolb presents four main modes of the learning experience. These include the CE, meaning concrete experience, the RO, or reflective observation, the AC, meaning abstract conceptualization, and finally the AE, also known as active experimentation. According to Ganira and Odundo, each mode presents situations catering to a different learning style. In the CE, students will be physically and actively involved in a new, concrete, tactile learning experience. Next, in the RO, students will reflect on their learning experience and the learning that took place from different perspectives. We then have the AC, in which students will develop theories and concepts based on their reflections and explain what was observed. Then finally, they reach the AE, in which they will plan and execute actions to test what they have learned. Now, this cycle seems quite abstract, but it will look different across different age groups, and the discussions may be more or less deep depending on the developmental level of each student. These four modes of learning bring forth four main learning styles that develop from a combination of the students' preferred modes of learning. Students who prefer the CE and the RO are considered diverging. Students who prefer a combination of the RO and the AC are known as assimilating. A combination of the AC and the AE are considered converging. And finally, students who prefer AE and CE are the learning style of accommodating. The learning cycle aims to integrate all modes of learning to ensure that all learning styles are incorporated into a lesson. Dantas and Kuna report that better learning can be achieved if teachers focus on many learning styles throughout their lessons. Restricting some learning styles may create a situation in which students are not recognised for their diversity and strengths. From what we have covered in this presentation so far, we know that teachers must work to minimise distractions in their classrooms and to ensure that students are not tempted into dual tasking and task switching situations. If teachers maximise the potential for student engagement and students have more of an active role in the learning, off-task distractions may be naturally resisted. In this next segment, I am going to discuss how project-based learning can enable teachers to engage their students and cater to their diverse learning styles. Project-based learning, also known as PBL, has been studied and analysed as an approach that aims at engaging all students in the classroom while building critical and creative thinking skills. According to a study presented by Al-Mullah in 2020, PBL views children as active participants in learning and views teachers as productive facilitators and responders to students. The main areas identified by Al-Mullah in PBL are collaborative learning, iterative learning, authentic learning, and disciplinary subject learning. According to Sumani and Kadawati, these areas in turn enable engagement by helping students to develop ideas, argue ideas, question, seek truth, and share perspectives. These findings can enable teachers to minimize what Jumet et al. Described as extraneous processing and build essential generative processing by promoting engagement and active learning. With this, students will enjoy focusing on the lessons and become less tempted by off-topic distractions. The process that PBL follows can be linked closely to the experiential learning cycle. The core concepts and goals of both approaches can be combined, as they have similar goals and methods. The ELC modes can enhance the PBL approach by providing deeper levels of analysis and ensuring that students' diverse learning styles are incorporated into the lesson. According to Al-Mullah, it is important to note that the PBL approach is not always suitable for every subject and learning area. At this stage in its development, it has shown great success in STEM-related subjects, but not always others. This does not mean that it should only be applied to those subjects, but that teachers should be careful when identifying educational goals to ensure that the PBL approach is best suited. In this presentation, I have compiled evidence from different journal articles to answer the following questions. We answered the first question by analysing 2 journal articles, revealing that our brains are not adapted to the ability to multitask, and that when faced with dual task situations, our focus jumps to one or our mind tries to focus on both. We answered the second question by investigating David Kolb's experiential learning theory, and found his learning styles and the cycle supported by his theory as a valuable way to cater to different students and their preferred learning styles. Finally, we discussed how the project-based learning approach can enable teachers to engage students well and set up learning in a way that reduces the temptation of distractions. The PBL has many valuable opportunities to do this, although teachers should carefully consider their classroom contexts and the goals of the learning before they apply this approach. Thank you all for listening. My reference list is on the following page.